Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our final science pub of the 2021-22 academic year. We bring brought to you by Oregon State University and OSU-Cascades as usual. My name is Nathan Moses, Associate Director of Events and Engagement at OSU-Cascades, and it's great to have you all here tonight. This evening, we'll be joined by Flaxen D L Conway, who will lead tonight's event entitled Perspectives and Complexities of Responsible Offshore Wind Development in Oregon. Before we get to our program, let's give you a quick reminder about our audience participation. So those of you that haven't joined us before, like all Science Pub, hearing from the audience is one of the most rewarding parts of our show. We want to hear from you, so participants for tonight's Science Pub may submit questions for our presenter via the YouTube live chats if you're logged in through YouTube, or via the Mentimeter app found at www.menti.com. You're going to use event number tonight, 80014885. You'll see that on your screen right now, and it will be on the little bug at the bottom of the screen as we go throughout tonight. Again, that's 80014885. If your question isn't answered, feel free to submit it to events@osucascades.edu, and we will try to get that to Flaxen to get that answered and to try to find a resource for you. For convenience, you're also going to find the QR code here on the screen and at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. What we do ask is that we actually have a trivia tonight. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, but you have the ability to ask questions throughout the presentation. So feel free to send as many as you would like, and we'll have that time at the end of the presentation this evening. So for the quiz, this is going to be kind of fun, and I will say, note of warning, we have about a 10-second delay when we do these productions. So as we go through our trivia tonight, do not be surprised if you are seeing on your mobile devices the trivia questions before I actually say them on screen. But we want to have a little activity to get your minds warmed up for the topic tonight. You're going to use your devices, and again, either using potentially a separate browser on your computer or using your mobile device. We have 5 multiple choice questions, and those of you that are playing for the first time, of special note, you've got 12 seconds to answer the question, and the faster you answer it correctly, the more points you're going to win. Now, the prize this evening, it's not necessarily what you might think. Tonight, we're just going to be going for Science Pub Points of Pride to see if you can top our other participants. And we do have a big group of folks tonight. We had over 300 folks register for tonight's program. So hope to see a lot of you all either out live right now in real time, or those of you catching us later on, you can still play along. So get ready to get going with that. Give everybody a couple seconds to get going on the Menti app. And if you're using those event codes, you should be putting in a username. Please be PG appropriate, as these will show up on screen. But we'll get started here in just a second. A lot of you. Ooh, I love seeing that. All those little avatars popping up. So it looks like we have a lot of players tonight. This is going to get competitive, Flaxen. I know Flaxen's going to come on a little bit later so she can make a comment about that. But this is probably one of our better trivia turnouts. So that's great. I'll give everybody a little bit of time. Oh, they're still coming in. This is great. This is a lot of fun. I love when people participate. It makes it so much better. All right. Looks like we've got just about everybody in. But again, if you're still trying to get in right now, you will have time to jump in with the quiz. So we're going to get our countdown started now to get going. And the first question, offshore wind, OSW, energy generation is one of several forms of marine renewable energy, MRE, generation technologies being considered for Oregon. Is this true or false? Wow, we got some geniuses in the room tonight. All of you said true. That is true. Currently, wave energy, OSW, and to a lesser degree, tidal have all been considered. All right. Next question. We'll get that started here in just 1 second. Countdown begins. What kinds of environmental considerations exist with OSW in Oregon? Impacts on birds, impacts on whales, impacts on fish and other seafood, impacts on ocean chemical and physical processes, all of the above, none of the above. Ooh, a little bit split on this one, but it looks like 16 of you at least got all of the above. Nicely done, nicely done. All right, question 3. Floating offshore wind energy generation currently exists at a commercial scale in the United States. True or false? Nicely done, the 27 of you. It is false. FOSW is the most nascent form of OSW, and as of now, the only thing that exists commercially are some small-scale fixed or stationary OFW facilities. All right, 4 or 5. The decisions needed to determine siting of OSW energy generation are made by the federal government, the state government, some combination of federal, state, and local government players. Nicely done. We have some smarties in the room. So yes, the correct answer is C. Somewhat of a trick question. It depends on the decision, but all levels should have input into these decisions. Ultimately, BOEM is in charge. All right, final question, and we'll see who our winners are for tonight. What kinds of social, economic, and cultural considerations exist with OSW in Oregon? Impacts on job, impacts on education and training, impacts on social justice, cultural connections to the sea, all the above, none of the above. All of the above is the correct answer. And as Flaxen says, D and then some. And I'm sure that we're going to talk a lot about that this evening. So appreciate everybody participating. Let's see a rundown real quick. The leaderboard. What do we have? Looks like Spam Ches. Very nicely done. Our winner of all the fake internet points tonight is Spam Ches. All right. Well, thank you all for playing. That was a lot of fun. That was fantastic. We have open now the question portal, so folks can go in and ask questions as we go throughout this evening. But just to get us started, I want to get us to the primary point of why you are here tonight. Introduce you a little bit, first of all, to our presenter, Flaxen Conway. As a director of Oregon State University Marine Resource Management Graduate Program, a professor in the School of Public Policy, and an Oregon Sea Grant Extension Specialist, Flaxen works with coastal communities, groups, and families affected by changes in natural resource policy and management. She helps access resources, build coalitions, and plan strategies that meet the needs of all interests. In partnership with community learners, agency personnel, and other subject matter specialists, she provides coastal and statewide outreach to engagement for the development of community educational programs and materials, and conducts action research related to cooperative learning, conflict transformation, personal and group leadership, community economic development, and adapting to change. Without further ado, I'd like to bring to you tonight, Flaxen.
Thank you, Nathan. Let's see, am I sharing my screen? Yes, I am. Okay, wow, that was so much fun. I want to just do that for the rest of the time. Way to go, Spam Checker, whatever the guy's name was. That was fantastic. Way to be on it. I just love science pub talks. You know, they're so much fun. You get to learn stuff, and they're so thought-provoking. Plus, you get to eat great food and have some cool beverages. So I hope that you enjoy yourself tonight. And I think the titles are really important, especially when I'm sitting in your chair, because they tell me what to expect, what we're really going to be going over. So I thought carefully about the title of this talk, and I hope that you feel like I'm sticking to it. That's what I'm going to try to do anyway. So anyway, I appreciated also you giving them a little bit about my bio, but I want to tell you about who I'm not, okay? Because Nathan just told you who I am. I'm not an engineer. I am not an oceanographer. I'm not a climate change scientist. I'm not an ecologist. I'm not an economist. There are many wonderful OSU experts that could talk to you about these topics in much, much, much more detail. I like to consider myself, I call myself an interdisciplinary pracademic. And I do that because I do run a research program, as Nathan talked about, how coastal communities adapt to change. I teach courses for graduate students who want to learn how to become interdisciplinary scientists and who want to become marine resource managers. And I do have the fantastic job of working with coastal community folk to better learn how to understand and develop strategies to cope with change. As a scientist and an educator, I believe that if we are really going to understand the richness and diversity and the complexity of the ocean, then we have to look at it as a coupled system, or what's called often the coupled human-natural system. And this is true whether we are at the Oregon coast, or we are in Sitka, Alaska, if we're in coastal Africa, or we're in the beach, as it's often called in urban areas. It's also important because the coupled system is part of one of the core concepts of the framework of what's called ecosystem-based management. And it's the framework under which all of our marine resources and marine places are managed in the US and in Oregon. And my work focuses on collaborative learning. And so how to build connections, how to build solutions together, how to build resilience. And the foundation of that work is transparency, fairness, and cooperative decision-making. And all of those things are very important for responsible action. Tonight, my talk is just an introduction to the topic of renewable energy and marine renewable energy and offshore wind development in Oregon. It is a big topic. It is a fastly moving topic. It is exciting. And it's also very, very complex. Energy, the ocean, and offshore wind can look different depending upon one's perspective. And there's lots of viewpoints and aspects to consider, and much more detail than that could be shared through various lenses. For example, an engineer or a builder might talk a lot about the technology or the grid. An ecologist or a commercial fisherman might talk about the biophysical aspects of the ocean, of the entire environment. And an economist or a financial consultant might be talking about jobs and costs and returns on investments. So I am going to be introducing you to some of these things through an interdisciplinary lens. And my talk has 3 parts. So we're going to start first with the why and the when. So to understand issues, especially complex issues, the way our brains work is we typically zero in and focus on the what. And then we kind of move out to the how. And then if we have time, we think about the why. And there's some really cool research out there these days that really encourages us to flip the script, to zero in on the why, and then the how, and then the what. And so how you go about doing that is by being curious, by asking a lot of questions, by asking yourself, by asking myself, what is it that I want to know about this? And why do I want to know about this? And what's important to me about this? And then I think, well, why is it important to Nathan? Why would he want to know about this? And research really shows that approaching confusion or complex topics with curiosity can lead to deeper learning and problem solving, which is what we need. Research also shows that this approach can be helpful in determining our personal role in change. And it steers us towards fairness and responsibility in adapting to change and building resilience. So speaking of change, a topic that I love, learning how to adapt to change is a daily practice for everybody. Doesn't matter if it's positive change or negative change. Change is a constant and it's uncomfortable to most people. And actually, it's not really change that's uncomfortable per se, but the transition that we go through, the psychological reorientation that we go through. So it can feel exciting or it can feel scary, but it can, most of the times it just kind of feels unsettling. but it can also be a time of great creativity. And the research points out that large complex issues like climate change, food security, energy resilience presents us with challenges that are really going to require creative, thoughtful, and complementary solutions to responsibly cope with these things over time. So let's get into the why of renewable energy and marine renewable energy and offshore wind specifically. And that's what the RE and MRE and OSW stands for, okay? So when it comes to these big complex issues like climate change and food security, energy resilience, we need as many potential solutions as we can possibly come up with, right? And renewable energy development is among the many potential solutions, both the known solutions that we have and the yet to be discovered solutions. So renewable energy continues to evolve and progress and improve, and that is exciting and wonderful. We definitely need that. Now, as land people, or like I like to call ourselves that, the people who work and live on the land for the most part, versus working out on the ocean, we might understand renewable energy on land. In fact, probably most of you, probably all of you, since you're such smarty pants, as Nathan called you, it could probably identify or at least list off a lot of the things that I have listed here. So solar, wind, geothermal, biofuels, and so on. And all of these renewable energy solutions have their positives and they all have their challenges associated with them. In fact, a 2021 study asked Oregonians about their interest in renewable energy types. And it's, as you can see here, it's pretty clear that we know these renewable energy options. Some of them may be a little bit more than others because they've been around a little bit longer. But we do know, but what's unclear is that it's probably, is one better than the other? Should we be putting all our eggs in one basket? And I would say that pretty much the research says there's no one silver bullet. It's going to take several things to find a lasting solution, integrated approaches. And I really liked this piece from the National Renewable Energy Lab and USAID, where it talked about how one of the things that we need to do is to be diversified. We need to diversify our energy generation portfolios. And basically what that's talking about is that, bringing together as many different types of technologies and that what we bring together really depends on the geography, the fuel use, and the water use needs in an area. So thinking about like what fits to that particular area. Finding lasting solutions also takes creativity, it takes imagination, it takes careful consideration, recognizing what other challenges exist and the connections among those challenges are what's often called cumulative impacts, being explicit about the trade-offs that likely have to be made because they will, avoiding negative impacts. Just avoid any and all that you can to any part of the coupled system whenever and wherever possible, and doing all that can be done up front to minimize the negative impacts when they can't be avoided. So, do we know all of renewable energy generation options? Might responsible marine renewable energy development be just one additional potential renewable energy solution? Those are important questions. And if marine renewable energy development is only one of many solutions, how much space and in what place should we be allocating for it if it complements land-based solutions as well? So why questions are really important because offshore wind will be a large-scale habitat change. And some have called it the largest industrialization of the ocean to date. So as Oregonians, we might ask ourselves, might we be best served by asking more why questions to better understand, perceive, know the ocean and its resources and the folks who people it? I'll be talking more about that. So I wanted to give you a real quick history of marine renewable energy and specifically wave energy at Oregon State University and in Oregon. And for those who know this better than me, you might roll your eyes at this, but I'm going to give it a go anyway. And that is that the 2000s, okay, so it kind of started in the early 2000s. There was a lot of research related to engineering, a lot of technological advancement. So environmental research started coming in, human development research, human dimensions, that's what the HD stands for. That's the socioeconomic, sociocultural types of research. That starts happening. Then we start having some outreach and engagement that's beginning during this decade. Community groups start forming to get involved in it, like the Fisherman's involvement in natural energy, or FINE. And they actually are very involved and help advance some of the research and development that's going on. So this decade was kind of viewed as the first marine renewable energy gold rush. Then in the 2010s, that decade, we have more research and development going on. We have a lot more collaborations happening, local, national, international, resulting in books and publications, and numerous experts and facilities starting to be known in all three of the science legs, if you want to call it that. And then we also have the Northwest National Marine Renewable Energy Center. And so because that was so long, they changed the name to the Pacific Marine Energy Center, thank God, so that I could say it tonight. That was a pretty big deal. We'll be talking about that. And then also lots of testing facilities. We've got and amazing ones, actually. The Hinsdale Wave Research Lab. We have the WeSurf, and we have PacWave. And what's kind of interesting about this is Hinsdale and WeSurf and PacWave individually would be cool enough. But the fact that it's actually quite unique in their aggregation, and it's been essential to the developers as they progress their technology over time. So I would say between those 2 decades, what you have is about 20 years of working collaboratively with many partners. And as a result of that, OSU has really become established and known for wave energy innovation, knowledge creation, training of the future renewable energy workforce. And there's a report that I have listed in the resources section, and I have a little picture of it here that talks about that. So PacWave's kind of a big deal that it became a reality. And it has 2 parts, PacWave North, which has an autonomous testing device, autonomous testing, device testing. And here's what it looks like. Okay, so it looks like right here is the Sentinel, and here's the device being tested. PacWave South is the newest thing to come on board, and it will. It's been a long time in the making. It's getting very close. In fact, there's a construction update URL there for you if you want to find out exactly where they are. But the thing about PacWave South is that it will be a testing facility for grid connected. So when things are being tested, the energy that they create will actually come onto the grid. So that's a pretty cool thing there. So, and the thing about PacWave also that makes it cool is that this was created collaboratively with stakeholders like the commercial fishing community and local decision makers. And it was a very thoughtful process, and I would encourage you to look into it. And there's been publications written about it and everything. So. All right, so that's why are we talking about wind, wave energy, right? I thought you were coming to hear about wind. Well, because they kind of build on each other. Again, we're talking about multiple solutions. So the history of offshore wind in Oregon is pretty short at this point. 2014, there was a company called Principal Power, which is still around, but they proposed a facility. It didn't really advance, I guess, the way that maybe they had hoped. And so by 2018, it kind of went away to a certain extent. And then, so where we are currently now is that there's no offshore wind in Oregon. But where we are now is that there is a lot of interest in what a lot of people would call, there's a real push for offshore wind in Oregon and in the US. So what does that look like exactly? And I picked this up off of, I think, this NOAA website. I thought they did a good job of talking about the why, right? Offshore wind energy development has the potential to play an important role in U.S. efforts to combat the climate crisis and build a clean energy economy. And they go on to talk about where it's happening. So if you look at BOEM, Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, they have their wind leasing pathway. And again, they're showing where it's happening, okay, different parts of the country. And they talk about 30 gigawatts by 2030, and which you'll hear a lot. And they also talk about creating 80,000 jobs, and we will be talking about that. So the why and the when leads you to the where, and that's where we're going to go next. And so to give you a preview, here's showing, this is the Northeast, some of the offshore wind area leases and areas around there, the mid-Atlantic. And then over here we have what's happening in Oregon and then Northern California. So I like to look at the where through the coupled systems lens. And when we talk about place, perspective is everything, right? So if you're over at the Oregon coast and you're looking down at where the sea meets the shore, you're very clear that this is the coast, right? And that it is a place. Well, I want to encourage you to start thinking about the ocean as place as well. We can imagine it, I think, land folk. We imagine the ocean as frontier, but the ocean is actually a place. And in fact, in the literature, it's now called the peopled seascape. And the thing about this place is that it is a public place. It is highly managed by the state and the feds, and it's a three-dimensional space. And excuse me, and it's important to become aware of and consider who's already using the space. What are they using it for? Where are they? How much are they there? When are they there? And to think about the benefits and the important services that come from this use. And so that could be food, it could be science, it could be transportation, it can be safety. So thinking about these uses and the benefits is really important, and considering the connections between those uses and the attachment of those users to this place, just like we're attached to place on land. So if we look at this geospatially, same thing. You could look over here on the left and you could see this map and you could say, well, there's just nothing out there. There's a bunch of white space. You know, I can relate to this. But this is what happens on the right-hand side, is what happens when you map all the uses onto the same place. And so I think it's important, because maps they're fantastic, but they can also be a little deceiving, right? And when you see the map on the right with all the uses there, you go, oh, well, wow, I guess this really is a busy place. But what it doesn't show you is that some folks that use this space use the bottom of the ocean, some people use the top of the ocean, and some people use all three levels. And that is an important thing to remember. The ocean as place is also a place with lots of connections, right? So when a fisherman comes out and, you know, gets in his boat and goes out to catch fish for the day, week, or month, depending upon how long they're out there, they generally don't just go straight out and come right back in, right? You know, they come out, they go up to the north, they go down to the south, and maybe they go up to the north, they unload, they come back out, they catch, and then they unload to the south. So there's a lot of connections, and fishermen use the entire ocean, not just portions of it, or the portion that's closest to their home port. But that's fishermen, right? We also know that creatures migrate and they move through this ocean space. So I think that movement and connections are hard to see on maps. And the take home here, I would say, is that there are current uses, and these uses overlap, and these users have to share the space in order to do their use. And that is somewhat different than when we start talking about privatization of space. So let's talk a little bit more detail about these users, and maybe some more about the benefits that they bring, and maybe some partnerships that they have between them. So I've mentioned the fisheries a little bit, but I'm talking about commercial, charter, and processors. And in 2021 alone, about 318 million pounds of seafood was harvested with the dockside value, just at the dock, not retail or whatever, of $206 million, 1,000 jobs related to commercial fishing. Processing adds another 1,000 jobs and another almost $50 million in export value. So that's a lot, and it doesn't include other land-based related entities like fuel and service and supply, shipyards, gear suppliers, ports. But I do want to caution that I think it's important to recognize that many of these uses have more than just one benefit. And so for fishing anyways, it goes beyond just food provisioning or the economy to knowledge provision. You know, a lot of fishermen are partners in research and where they're studying not just fisheries, but ocean change, atmospheric change, that kind of thing. And they're an important part of the culture of coastal communities. So, but working our way down the list here, shipping and tugs, you know, certainly benefit us by transportation of goods, providing the goods that we all use. And one cool partnership that exists there is through Washington Sea Grant, the Crabber Tow Lane Agreement. And this is something that you can Google and take a look at. It's not a law. It's just an agreement between these two industries to figure out how to cooperate in this space. Speaking of that, the fiber optic cables is another good example of that, in that they benefit us by global communication and connecting us to the world. But when that industry first started up, it started working collaboratively with the commercial fishing community industry so that they could avoid having some problems happen. And you can find that by looking up the Oregon Fishermen's Cable Committee. There's also non-commercial folks out there like recreational users, right? Recreational boating, fishing, surfing, diving. And the benefits there are fun and family and culture, sport. Scientists are another group that often, it's a stakeholder, but people don't think about them that way, but they benefit us every day by discovery and monitoring and that kind of those activities actually inform managers who then, manage our resources. And so I thought I would share with you just at NOAA as an example, the National Oceanographic Atmospheric Administration does a lot of surveying. Okay, this is for the East Coast, but you could have a very similar table for the West Coast. And this shows all of the surveys that they do and how long that they've been happening and what they're about. And so the thing here is, so we have a stakeholder that's having to figure out how they're going to cope with the impact of all offshore wind industrial sites on their science, and how that would then impact resource management, which then impacts the resource users. So kind of an interesting thing to take a look at. Continuing on, because there's a lot of stakeholders, right? There's environmental NGOs like Oceana, Surfrider, Audubon, Oregon Shores, and others that benefit us by focusing on place and various creatures and understanding and conservation. We have economic development groups, both public and private, who benefit us by focusing on jobs and livable communities. We have tribal nations, which benefit us by focusing on place and people and resources over time immemorial. We have military and hazard response stakeholders, two there, but both focusing on our safety at different levels. And we have the marine renewable energy industry, which is a stakeholder that's focusing on energy resilience. And then, of course, we have all of us, right? The citizens of Oregon and the citizens of the US. So the who and the where lead us to the what. And this is part 3. And I thought when I thought about this, I thought, well, let's look at this through kind of complexities, technological complexities and environmental complexities and so on. So we're going to look first at technological complexity, and The thing about offshore wind is that it's relatively new compared to, say, onshore wind or solar or dams. There's a lot of amazing research going on, and it's a rapidly changing technology. In fact, the power generation capability keeps improving. For example, the original offshore wind facilities in Denmark, some of them have already been decommissioned. We've got Block Island, which is off of the coast of Rhode Island, the only existing offshore wind facility in the US that has 6 megawatt turbines that were installed in 2016. Well, guess what? Now there's 8 megawatt turbines. And I was watching a webinar the other day, and they were talking about even bigger turbines. So the size of the machine is, I think, something to be aware of, is something to have a perspective about. And so I wanted to convey that these are large, and sometimes it's hard to see that when you're just looking at a picture of just a turbine, right? So if you have something else in the frame, you can see how large it is. But for those of us who aren't at the shore a lot or are not out in the ocean, I thought it might be good to say that, how big is 1,000 feet? Well, it's the size of the Eiffel Tower. So if you've ever been in Paris and looked up at the Eiffel Tower, it's a pretty big thing. It's twice as tall as the Washington Monument. It's larger than the Prudential Plaza, which is a 64-story skyscraper in Chicago. And so you can imagine that something that's 1,000 feet tall is going to preclude like even NOAA's aerial surveys, because they can only be so high and see. So what's going on, like with whales or climate. So the type of technology relates to the place. And so as you can see here, we have the land-based technology that's the monopile. And then we have in shallow waters, we can still do that. So that's Block Island. This is the proven technology. Then you get over here into the demonstration technology. You've got transitional water and deep water. And this is floating offshore wind. This is what we're going to be seeing in Oregon because of our continental shelf, goes down pretty quick. So it doesn't take long before we're in this deep water. And so again, thinking about perspective, if you're looking at it just this one, it doesn't look that big until you look at just the base. And you can see that it's a pretty big thing. This is a tractor trailer. So on land, it's pretty large. Let's talk about power generation perspective here for a second. And we'll be talking about, I'm going to be using terms like call areas and that kind of thing. But for right now, what I just want you to see is, so BOEM says that, the plan is to lease sufficient space for 3 gigawatts capacity in Oregon. So there's these 3 places that they were talking about as of February. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. And if you filled up that entire area, you would be able to generate 10 gigawatts or almost 3 or a little over, 3.5. So that's important to know. And then let's talk also about how big the call areas are. The spaces for this offshore wind energy generation. And there, as of early April, there were 3 call areas off the coast of Oregon. Now there are 2. But let's look at them a little bit closer, because depending upon your perspective, if you look at that, you go, oh, well, that's not that much. Or you can look at it. 2 people could be sitting right next to each other and somebody go, oh, look, they don't look that big. And somebody else could look at it and go, holy crap, that's, a third of the state. So I think it's important to get a little perspective and put it in a frame of reference that we have related to that. So let's look at this way. So I wanted just to give you a frame of reference. The city of Corvallis is 14 square miles big. Okay, Bend is 33 square miles, Eugene's 41, Salem's 49, Portland's 145. So I don't know where you are, but maybe that gives you some sort of perspective. When you look at these 2 call areas, there is the Coos Bay call area, which is right here, and the Brookings call area, which is right here. And I've given you a little bit of, and this is all from the BOEM website, so that you can get it there. But what I wanted to point out was this Coos Bay call area is 1,364 square miles. So that's roughly the size of Coos County, the entire Coos County, okay? So that's bigger than Lincoln County or Tillamook County or Marion County. And it's about the size, it's just a little bit smaller than if you took all of Benton County and all of Polk County and you put it together. So when you start thinking about it that way, that's, it gives you a little bit different perspective, right? The Brookings call area is 448 square miles. And that's roughly 3 times the size of Portland. And it's bigger than all of Multnomah County. So you start again to get some perspective. So it's important. Well, let's go back for a second. So part of the reason why this is important is because with this use is a privatization of space. Boats and fishing and things will not be able to go through here because it will not be safe. And so when you have that, then you have pressure that happens on the other parts of the area. And so you can kind of think about this like urban sprawl, right? Another complex issue that we're dealing with. Another thing to remember about floating offshore wind is that it's not just one device. It is an array. It's multiple devices in what's called an array. That's what this is called right here. And it's connected by cables to the shoreside substations in the electrical grid. That's why we would have it, to get this electricity, right? So I think it's important to notice what's below this. This is the water level right here. What's below the water level is another schematic of what it's going to look like, as well as what's above the water level. So another level of complexity then is the environmental complexity. And so again, there's a lot of good research going on, but there's still a lot of unknowns and many more questions to be answered. Are these things going to be artificial reefs, or are they going to suffer a lot of biofouling, and that could change the water quality? Are they going to be great for co-location with aquaculture, or are they going to be debris sinks for a lot of debris that's going to get caught up in there and then have some other impacts? And so let's talk about some of these other impacts. We've got collisions that could happen, collisions with birds, again, to above the water. We've got collisions that could happen with whales below the water. And whales, there's 2 types of collisions. There's ship strikes, and then there's also entanglements. And entanglements can happen, the primary entanglements happen with mooring lines and chains, transmission cables. The secondary entanglements happen with marine debris that I was talking about that gets caught up on those mooring lines. So again, all of these things we could go into a lot more detail. You might hear a little bit about this, electromagnetic fields or EMFs. There's some good research going on about this, but again, there's still lots of questions that need to be answered. What we're talking about here are electromagnetic fields that are emitted by the transmission lines. And there's some ways to try to get to deal with the issue by burying the cables or by armoring the cables, but there's still going to be some areas where the cables cannot be buried or armored. And so there's some questions there that still need to be answered. Noise is another potential environmental impact. Increased noise. We already know there's some noise that goes on out there, obviously, but I think what's important to know about here is that the noise would be different depending upon which phase you were in. So if you're in the construction phase, it would be more acute sounds. Once you get into the operational phase, it would be a lower level of noise, but constant noise within the wind industrial site area. Ocean changes, physical environment changes are another potential environmental complexity. And so what we're really talking about here are wind wakes. And what we're talking about is a reduction in wind speeds inside the industrial sites, and downwind can impact an area that's actually much larger than the footprint of the industrial site. So this is an important consideration because wind stress and wind stress curl are the physical forces that drive a process called coastal upwelling. And that is a process that is immensely influential in Oregon's primary food chain production and ecological connectivity. So kind of think of it as like very important for the food chain. So there's a lot of complexity here, environmental complexity. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's some great research going on. BOEM has funded a lot of different things, and one of them is a literature review that stated that they believe that the effects would be minimal or moderate. There's still a high degree of uncertainty because, frankly, there's no floating offshore wind developments out there right now, so they don't know for sure. And there's also the potential for cumulative effects that would happen at a large scale, say of, across oceans and that kind of thing. And I liked this figure a lot from Maxwell because it talks about the challenge, right? And then it starts giving some solutions. And some of the solutions that you'll see in here are like siting away, avoid important habitats. So anyway, you can take a look at that. That's in the resources that I will have for you. Okay. So the final area of complexity, and you guys are hanging in there with me, I hope. The final area of complexity that I thought we'd talk about tonight is the socioeconomic complexity. And honestly, this is the stuff that I probably know the best. With all the major developments that happen on the ocean place and marine spaces, there are environmental impact assessments and social impact assessments. And what I'm going to talk about tonight are economic impacts and social impacts that I have listed there, which are jobs, revenue, markets, and then the importance of process, and then wrapping up with what's our role in it. So let's look at the economic impacts first. And when somebody is considering economic impacts, they might be thinking about physical infrastructure impacts, like changes on the onshore, like changes to the port and businesses. In fact, the Coos Bay port study, which I have up on screen and is in the resources section, it talks a lot about that. It also talks about offshore infrastructure. I don't know if anybody remembers the new Carissa, which was a ship that got beached here and took a while to get off. So, the good news is the benefit of offshore wind was that it would probably result in strengthening and building the emergency response industry. Jobs. So let's talk about jobs. That's a big one. We saw the figure 80,000 jobs on the BOEM slide. And I kind of, when I think about jobs, I think about it as an apples to apples and apples to oranges kind of situation, because we absolutely need new jobs. We need good jobs. And we need details about those jobs, because without those details, it's hard to do any sort of trade-off analysis. So for the existing jobs that we have wages and skill sets and training. And so if you knew that for both the new jobs or potential jobs and the existing jobs, then you can make some of these trade-offs. And this is true for revenue as well. There's potential revenue generation, and then there's also the prevention of existing revenue generation that has to be considered. As far as benefits for coastal communities of place and interest, I think it's really important to talk about things like benefit agreements and workforce training, targeting and prioritize hiring in the communities where these industrial sites will be close to, energy security and resilience, that kind of thing. And then the last part, in terms of markets for the energy, that's quite an area of a lot of research that's going on. And there's this one piece by David Bidwell from the East Coast, but I thought it kind of summed up the whole regionalism theme that's starting to come up, which is, even in the title, it says, New Englanders support more offshore wind power, just don't send it to New York. And that has to do with a sports rivalry, of course, so interesting there. Okay, so the last part of socioeconomic complexity is the social complexity. And we're going to talk a little bit about the processes that are going on in the timelines. And so when you see when you participate in a webinar with BOEM, you're going to see, you could see this exact slide because it's theirs, where they break down a year and they break it down by quarters and they tell you what is happening there. Or you could see this one, which has kind of several years going across and kind of like, here's what's happening at this time and here's what's happening here. And you start seeing things like call and lease and wind energy areas. So I wanted to talk exactly what that's about. So a call area is really a call for information and nominations. It's a public comment period where you can talk about the uses and concerns that happen there. And it's also the time where they request nominations of interest for development. Then what happens that from the call area is the wind energy area, or the WEA. And then what happens from there is the lease area. So geospatially, this is what it looks like. You have a call area, let's say it's this big right here. Then you have WEAs, or wind energy areas, that would be within the call area. Then those would be broken into lease areas. And then when that's leased, you would get the wind industrial site. And on the right-hand side here is what it looks like, which is called the New York Bight, off of New York. And I'll be showing you more. Well, in fact, I'll show you right now. There's this is the New York Bight, and this is showing you not only where this has taken place, but each one of these leases and how much money is associated with each of those leases for this. So I think that that's an interesting thing to keep up with. If you want to keep up with what's happening in Oregon, you keep up with it by going to the BOEM website under Oregon activities. You can also look at any other state as well, but that's where I got some of the information that I've shared with you today. It's important to know that BOEM does not operate, as your quiz said to you or questioned you about it. It's not just a federal decision-making process, although the buck does stop there. They work very closely with the Department of Land Conservation and Development here in Oregon, and DLCD and BOEM have created this really cool mapping tool called OraWind that shows the different uses, what's happening, and you can go in and hit on any of these things here and it'll pop up. But there's other state agencies that have helped as well. For example, well, we'll go back here. The fisheries data in here could have been improved, and it has been improved by the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and NOAA. Both have provided a lot of fisheries data that's been really helpful to improve that. The Oregon Department of Energy is also very much involved in this topic, and they are doing several public meetings and have created are in the process. They want your comments actually on their floating offshore wind study that they have. In fact, they have a meeting tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow, day after tomorrow in Coos Bay. And so you can give them some public comment there or online. So we have other state agencies involved as well. And the thing about Oregon Department of Energy is the connection between what's happening with offshore wind and what's happening with the other renewable energy solutions that are happening around the state. So I'm going to wrap this up basically with talking about process, because that's my gig and I love it. But so the thing about process is that is the process that's going on here outreach, which is actually what I'm doing with you. I'm presenting to you, I'm presenting a bunch of stuff to you, and you're going to think about it, right? Or is it engagement? And those are often used as synonyms, and that's not true. That's not what they are. In fact, engagement, stakeholder engagement is really different. And while there's no one perfect menu for stakeholder engagement, the best processes all have effective communication, broad-based inclusion, prioritization strategies, early and mutual learning, and alternatives analysis. In other words, stakeholders are encouraged to provide input, and as a result of this, they feel heard, they feel confident that their input will at least be considered or used in decision-making. And when you don't have effective two-way communication, what you can have are stakeholders that feel left out of the process and decisions, and because of that, they are more apt to oppose any kind of outcome or action. And there's so much research based on this from all over the world, and a lot of recommendations on how to do things differently. So I'll end with, so what's next and what's my role? What's your role? What's our role? I'll tell you, my role is to keep learning as much as I can at Oregon State University and Oregon Sea Grant. There's a lot of ongoing conversations about research, how to improve research, how to get more research going on, keep going with testing, teaching. My own personal role is to continue to try to practice this why approach as much as I can, to read and listen, to be open to learning, because that is, the only way we're going to come up with these solutions together. And I think our role is to share knowledge and our perspectives with others. And we do that through, engaging in meetings and events and public comment periods and around the dinner table and, just talking. So I've been using a lot of acronyms tonight: BOEM, NREL, NOAA, all of these things. These are all important players. They kind of fall into different categories that you have here. And I have those for you in a resource sheet that Nathan's going to talk about. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up by just leaving with a quote that I got out of a publication that I thought, I can't remember it right now. I realized that I forgot to put it on there, but I liked it because it says, a just transition to marine renewable energy, the process and the outcome depends on development of a socially equitable set of principles, approaches, and practices that harmonize economic development with social and environmental well-being, emphasizing fairness and inclusivity in engaging stakeholders and the public. So with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Nathan and hopefully try to answer some of your questions. And I hope that I've stimulated your curiosity to look at these complex issues through multiple lenses. And hopefully you've stimulated your willingness to learn more about others and their perspectives, and because we need everybody's perspectives to come up with a lasting solution to this. Thank you.
Awesome. And, I think that sometimes, as Flaxen and I were talking about tonight's presentation, we want to rush automatically towards the solution or the thing like we were talking about. And I equate this, my brother's previous life, he worked for an engineering firm where I think he had a group of 10 to 12 engineers, but they needed the person that could work through the process. The engineers were brilliant in creating the thing, but considering all the things that impacted the thing was terribly, terribly important. I think we're such a rush to learn about the new tech or whatever else. We don't spend the time that we need to in considering the constituents and all these other factors at play. So Flaxen, I think that from that standpoint, I learned a lot. I love process-oriented things. I think it's very interesting. And I think you captured that quite well tonight. So thank you for that.
Great, yeah, sure.
So regarding for questions, everybody, and Brent, I'll have you fill this back up real quick if you could. Just a reminder for everybody, we've got some questions coming in. Utilize that Mentimeter app tonight. Definitely get that up there. We're still taking questions. We'll be doing that through the end of the presentation tonight. Down at the bottom of the screen, you see the event code for this evening that you can plug in. And again, Brent's got the QR code up there, so thank you very much for the production side. You guys can snap a photo of that with your mobile device and get right in there to the question portal that's up currently. And again, if anybody would like to use the YouTube chat, you're welcome to throw some questions in there as well. A couple of you have definitely resonated. Some of the earlier questions until Flaxen got deeper into the presentation were sort of around the impact of technology on wildlife. There were literally 9 questions about that. So I think because they were asked so early on, at least from my perspective, you sort of identified that because these systems don't currently exist, there's lots of still research that we're doing in that. So I guess, is there anything else you'd like to add in addition to, I guess, that very, very, very brief synopsis from my standpoint?
Honestly, I think there's a new study that's happening in Oregon looking at the impact on whales. I didn't mention that, so that's my bad. Through the Marine Mammal Institute, there is, I guess it depends on the size of the creature. Okay, so like there's, looking at little things in the benthic habitat all the way to the biggest whales. So there's a lot of, there's research going on. There's a lot more research that could go on, so I don't want to make it sound like just sit back, folks, because we'll be answering those questions tomorrow. It's not really quite like that. So support research. And actually, this sounds somewhat self-serving, and I don't mean to say it like that, but the research that we've done on the public and on different stakeholders, not on them, but with them, it really talks about how people want answers. They want answers to these questions. They want to know these things, and they tend to want to know them before things happen. Avoid something before you have to mitigate it later.
Yep. Yeah, and it's interesting. As you were going through your presentation, you brought up, and I think it was about halfway through, when you were talking about laying of fiber optic cables. Mm-hmm. And again, I think your presentation, there's all these things that I'm like, wow, I've never looked that up before. So I have to admit, as I'm listening to you, I'm looking up fiber optic, oceanic fiber optic integration throughout the world. And it was blowing my mind because I started looking at those pathways, similar to how that map that you had presented earlier about where those the levels you called it, kind of the 3 levels. And I'm like, wow, even that we take for granted. I think that started in the late 80s, if I'm not mistaken. And these processes and these things that happen, these results that we get, but we have no concept of what it took to get there. So my mind is spinning a little bit. So the audience will have to apologize. I'll have to apologize ahead of time.
Well, so
I've got
Nathan,
all kinds of things.
That's right, Nathan, because you're a land person.
Uh-huh.
You're land folk. And so we don't think about what's on the bottom of the ocean,
Yep.
In fact, in one of my classes, I use a little cartoon that has a bunch of people sitting around and they're all going, I don't know why I don't care about what's on the bottom of the ocean. I just don't. And I think, the reality is people do if they knew, if they thought about it, right? Yep. You're going to think about it. So, okay.
No, that's the truth. That's good. Looks like one of the questions. Speaking of which, so the map that you showed that showed the different layers and kind of the traffic off the coast and what was integrated. Is there any sort of a neat 3D model or a concept? I'm guessing if I had children, I have children, but my children would love to see that. Is there any sort of a neat thing that BOEM does to kind of get kids interested in this? And they're specifically thinking about some sort of a 3D model or a mapping utility to kind of really show the interlacing of that activity.
Well, I would say, I don't know how much 3D it has, but go to AuroWind. Play around with AuroWind, okay? And I have that in the resources where you can just type in, at BOEM, type in AuroWind. There's also the marine cadastre. There's tons of different geospatial tools. I have to admit to you that I am not the person to talk to you about those things, okay? I mean, I think they're super cool, but I have no idea how to do them.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. Let's see here. Let's get some other ones. Oh, I will say, so real quick reminder too, we mentioned this resource page that we put together. In your description for this particular event for tonight, in the description, if you do the little drop down, at the bottom, there's a link to resources. So we have a nice little PDF that Flaxen was able to put together with some of these resources. And as she warned me, they are ever changing. So they are current as of May 9th. So we will continue to upgrade those as they go. But if you are looking at some of these links and some of the things that we've talked about tonight, it's in the description for this specific event that you can pull up at any time. All right, let's see, another question that came up here. Oh, okay, so this is interesting. So OSW sounds like a huge engineering feat with lots of unknown risks. And again, they talk marine organisms or whatever else. Is there less of an emphasis now in Oregon looking to integrate wind energy on land and closer to the demand for electricity, or why is it kind of this push around the marine usage of some of these technologies?
That would be a wonderful question to pose to BOEM. Okay.
Yeah.
I think there's a push to create as many different options as possible, but it seems like offshore wind is definitely the one du jour, I guess, and I'm not, I'm not an energy expert. And so I don't, I think it probably would be a great question to also pose to the Oregon Department of Energy at one of their public meetings and look at their report and even just go spend some time on the Oregon Department of Energy's website and look at the various different types of renewable energy and then say, well, you're looking at, I'm wondering, because I try to do this why thing, right? So I'm wondering why if we have this much geothermal and we have this much onshore wind and we have this much solar, how much offshore wind do we need? So it's not a great answer, but it's the one that I have.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Let's see some of these questions too. I'm going to pull some process-wise for partnerships. The first one is, what have been some really effective two-way engagement processes you might have been a part of or witnessed related to complicated topics like you presented on tonight?
Oh. That's not even a plant, I don't think. I never even told you.
No, question from the audience. There was no plants with questions tonight, people.
No, not at all, actually. In fact, yeah. Okay, so I won't waste time on that. Yes, I have had the good pleasure of working on so many collaborative things. It's hard for me to land on one, but I'll pick one related to this, and that's one that was basically designed and implemented by my colleague in Sea Grant at the time. She's now a county commissioner in Lincoln County. Katie Jacobson was actually instrumental in working out the whole PACWave thing, working with the PACWave, the scientists, the engineers, the local community leaders, the commercial fishing community, to actually decide where that should be, how big it should be, where it would have the least amount of impacts. And so that's a good example of two-way exchange. And so the ways that it's not just like, tell me what you think and then come back and present it. It's more like, well, what if we did it here? Well, if you did it there, okay, well, now we've looked at this, but this part can't work. So now we have to, so it's working through something together. And so it does take more time, okay? But it usually results in not just a decision, it usually results in an agreement. And that's the difference.
So really kind of it comes down to the fact that both sides are being heard. And like there is this presentation piece and there's this collaboration piece from the constituent that they're asking feedback on. And it's really like you said, the end result becomes something that I'm going to say both parties, but all parties feel good about and feel like that it's meeting the needs.
Exactly. And it's not all, butterflies and moonbeams, I mean, it's not easy at times because we see things as we are. But it's if you take the time to work that through and, I know a lot of the I know people from all of that whole stakeholder list, and I think all of them would be excited to be trying to figure out how to work on making this work the best for everybody, so.
The next question is, and again, I'm trying to remember what part of the presentation this was, but the question saying somebody thinks that you said something about people would be excluded from an entire call area. Can you clarify what uses would be excluded from call areas or from an FOSW array?
Excellent. Yes, this is why you have to be careful about what you say. Okay, so there's the call area, right? And then within that call area, there will be a wind energy area. And then within that wind energy area, there will be lease areas. And then within the lease area, there will be a floating offshore wind industrial site. And if you noticed on the one slide of BOEM, it said in the near term, we're looking for 3 gigawatts. But the thing about a call area is that you might put one WIA in there, or you might put 2, or you might put 3. And within each WIA, you could have several leases, right? So I showed you the slide of the New York Bight showing all of them. So once you have, even one industrial site will be an exclusion zone, because if you remember all of the cabling and everything that it's going to take to hold these in place, it's a 1,000-foot thing, right? So it's got to, but we have smart people, engineers that know how to do this. So even one array or one industrial site will be an exclusion. You won't be able to go through there on a boat or drag a net by it or anything like that because you could get caught in it. So if you have multiple arrays and multiple industrial sites within the WIA and multiple WIAs, so if you build over time, you could conceivably fill out the whole call area. Now that BOEM has made it, they try to be clear that they're not looking to do that in the near term. And so I hope that answers the question. Does it?
Yeah,
Did I miss it? Okay.
I'm hoping so. That's the one thing that's tough with the online viewers. Hopefully we hit it. And if not, you can always email us so we can get more clarification on it.
Absolutely. Happy to talk about it.
One of the questions is, mentioned some of the work that OSU is currently doing. Is there any OSU work on the current effects of upwelling and OSW?
That is a great question that I wish I had an answer for. But I think that what I will say, and maybe this is being a little dangerous, but I will say that I think there will be. If there's not right now, there definitely will be. I mean, we have some amazing oceanographers in the College of Earth, Ocean, and Atmospheric Sciences who study upwelling and the impacts, all the different things that are impacting not just upwelling, but the changes in the ocean and how it impacts various different things. And so I don't know off the top of my head right now if there's somebody specifically looking at this, but I'd lay a 20 on the table, there will be, right? So.
And when we get confirmation, look for Science Pub 2024, where we can do a recap on current research.
Yeah, that would be the ways this is moving. It might be, Science 2024. Yeah, could be.
Let's see here. Kind of a specific example, and again, based on how much you will know on this. Mentioned earlier that some earlier collaborations with fishing specifically, what have been some of the key factors that have helped harness those collaborations when I would think because of the industry as you were talking about, it's such a huge industry, and I'm sure that there's all kinds of concerns from that standpoint. What have been some, I guess, key agreement points or partnership points or points of collaboration?
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so I mentioned the collaboration that took place with Packwave, right? So I'll pick a different one. I could talk a little bit more about the fiber optic cables one. I think it's a really good one because it's been around for a while, and the program is really cool. It's called the Oregon Fishermen's Cable Committee, or OFCC. And, and God, Scott, if you're listening, I don't know if he's on tonight, but if he is, I'm sorry if I messed this up. But my understanding of it is that, the fiber optic folks knew that, this is what's going to be happening, right? They wanted to move in that direction, but they didn't want to do it in a way that either got their cables messed up or, cause some other harms. And, because cable's expensive, right? Well, so are fishing nets. And so if you're out there fishing and your net gets hung up on one of these cables, not only is it going to rip up the net, but it's dangerous. My understanding is that it's dangerous. So they set up an agreement. They set up this organization to talk to each other about this. So when there's a cable that's going to be laid, they get notice out to all of the fishermen that are using nets in that area that could, and so they know if they also set it up to where if something happened, they can, just cut their net right there and they will be reimbursed for the net because nets are not cheap. I mean, we're talking, I don't even know, but a lot of money. And so, it's a great example of, well, I want this, but what do we both want? What we both want is to have neither one of us to have something bad happen to what we're doing. I'm sure there's also times at which they talked about where you really can't put the cables there. Like that's not a good place to put it. You're never going to be able to put it there. So, I think that's what I meant when I said fishermen's knowledge and they're knowledge providers as well as because they know this space. They know the way that the ocean moves. And I don't even know half of what they know. I'm just trying to tell you about what they know. but I've learned over the years of working with them, like of listening to them and studying their community and everything that, and so with PackWave, another good example maybe of this, if I may, do we have time?
Oh yeah, please.
Okay. So another thing that happened, so with wind energy. So when the wind energy, the first developers were coming out and they were going to, try demonstration projects out on the water and everything. This was before some of the testing facilities were in place and everything. There was a buoy that they brought out, and Fisherman worked with the developer, and they took it out there. They even took people out there to see where the buoy was. Well, the buoy sunk. Okay, and like everybody else was horrified, and the fishermen were like, man, it's rough out here. Stuff sinks. It's a harsh place, right? So they weren't wagging their fingers or anything. They were like, wow, this is a bummer. That this is. In fact, they were like, this is going down. I think it's going down. When it went down, what they realized is, it's a very dynamic place. The buoy didn't just land on the bottom, and they knew exactly where it was, and they could go over and get, if they had the infrastructure, lift it up, right? So that took a while to find it. So, with the most respectful way, we started calling it Bob. Where is Bob? Buoy on bottom, So it's a little bit of kind of a funny story, but a good example of industries working together to figure it out. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. You said that, and then I'm thinking about the I think it's the 90s movie, something about Bob or something like that. So I was thinking like the Bob replacing Bill Murray. Let's see here. All right, these are great. Lots of good questions, everybody, and I'm trying to get through these when I can. One that came in a little bit earlier. So we talked about the agreements, like you just gave the example with the fisheries. Mm-hmm. I think somebody's asking for, and I look at that as kind of like a land use piece. Like a neighborhood comes together, somebody proposes construction, they figure out like all sides of it. One thing you did mention though is like a benefit agreement that might help a coastal community. Can you give a little bit more explanation of what that looks like? And is that around benefits of like a company coming in and installing said technology and like how it's going to benefit the community, or what does that look like? So what exactly in your terms is a benefit agreement? Well,
okay, so I'm not a specialist in this, but I would say that's exact how you described it is a good way to describe it. It's like, if this is going to happen, what are going to be the benefits for our community? Are we going to have things like job training so that we're the entities that get those jobs? Are we going to have prioritized hiring and to get these jobs, and not just the all levels of jobs? Like, I think that's what I was trying to get to in terms of being specific about what kind of jobs, what wages, what kind of knowledge, skills, and abilities, how long do they last, that kind of thing. So it could be training, setting up agreements with community colleges or other entities that can provide the training for people to get these jobs.
And is it also like, and I don't know, I'm just thinking of this of things that I've heard, but could it also be sort of in modifications or changing energy technologies where maybe you have a group of folks, if, for example, like oil drilling platforms, as are taken offline, do you give priority to train the folks that used to work on those? Like, is there anything like that could potentially happen as well, where sort of like you're phasing out one energy job into another, so you're giving a prioritization to those folks?
Well, that could be the case in the Gulf, I guess. But we have no.
Right, we don't have it here.
We don't have it here. And I was talking to a colleague the other day, and we were talking about looking at the press and everything of when offshore drilling was proposed off the coast of Oregon, and the concerns that were raised about that, and I think some of the same concerns are here, basically. I mean, it's not the same thing. It's not a drill, but it is an industrial site.
Okay. let's see here. And this one, again, might be a specific expert question. And I will say, everybody, really good questions. What I'm trying to go through right now is there are a lot of very, very technology-specific things in here. So if we don't answer the question, again, let us know. We'll see if we can't hook you up with somebody from one of our units here in OSU to see if we can get some answers. But for Flaxen's ability to not have to continue to say I'm not an expert in that, I want to be nice in the questions. But I will ask this one because I'm just curious from a process perspective. When we talk about constituents that are weighing all these different factors and looking at some of the building maintaining these turbines that are in ocean as opposed to onshore, is there a tremendous difference in expense, or is it one of those things as people are looking at these different solutions and partnering and talking about these things? I guess what kind of cost factors for infrastructure might there be between the two? And I know that, again, that's a difficult question because it's very, very broad. But I think just this person's looking, just generally speaking.
Okay, well, generally speaking, I would say that I would say think about the environment. Think about the ocean environment. It is a very challenging environment. If you talk to anybody who either does research out there or runs any kind of boat or facility, they're going to tell you how challenging it is. We have intense weather. We have things, the maintenance that it takes to keep boats going is huge, right? And so I would think that the maintenance that it would take to keep these things running in this environment would be pretty great. That said, and I mean, I know some things, but there's a lot that I don't know. And so, I would say that it would be interesting to get a person who maintains one of these devices, one of the monopile devices on land, and then get a person who maybe does offshore drilling, right? Who's been on a drill rig and knows about that. And then get some other people and say, so how would it be different? How much cost are we talking about? Now, that's just the maintenance part of it. The creation of these things, and this gets back to the infrastructure that we have on the West Coast, where the creation of these things will happen is another question to ask. Is this something that can happen in Coos Bay? Is this something that has to happen in Portland and be shipped down? I apologize for saying that I don't have the answers, but I don't think I'm the only one that doesn't have the answers. But I really, what I love about these questions, and I'm sure you've got a whole lot more of them, is that good. Keep it up, people. Keep asking. I think that's really important, is to be thinking about this, because I think that if you think it's a kind of, I don't want to say yes or no thing, but or you think it's like it's this or it's that, it's not really like that. It's very complex. And that doesn't mean we can't do it. It just means, I don't mean we can't do it, meaning we can't figure it out. It just means that it's not a simple thing. It's going to take some time to think about it. And so please do, get on those websites, ask these things. Our College of Engineering has some amazing people that are studying. We got people studying just the array part. We got people studying the grid. We got a lot of people. So hopefully they'll be doing these talks instead of me. And you could focus right down into the technology and what's happening. I think that would be a great thing. I would love to see that.
Yeah, and I will say again, the resource list that you presented, I really encourage folks to take a look at that. I'm not necessarily saying you have to do it tonight at 8:00 at night, but take a look at it. All of our science pubs are listed on this channel, can be watched at any time afterwards. But take a look at some of those resources, because it's amazing the number of things that we throw acronyms a lot, and you did a really good job of explaining kind of who lived in what funnel for oversight. But there's some really, really interesting materials available. So definitely take a look at that, because I think it complements what was discussed tonight, Flaxen, very well. and definitely appreciate your time tonight, as we kind of typically do with science pubs. Do you have any, I guess, final comments or thoughts? Like, I think if anything else I took from this, it's continue to ask questions, continue to dig deeper, continue to search for the complexities, because that's how we're going to get the best answers. But kind of any parting words from you?
Just that's great. I'm glad you got that. That was what I was hoping people would get. and that it's, don't just look at just one source. You know what I mean? Like, look at, if you want to learn about the ocean, you can learn about it through, various different entities, and, and ask them their perspective of these things. I think that's really important. And you can do that whether you're going to look at, Surfriders website, or you're going to look at Oregon, Seafood Processors Association's website, or you're going to look at NOAA, or you're going to look at BOEM. Look at it from as many different sides as you can.
Yep. Good advice. Good advice. Well, everybody, again, I'd like to say thank you again very much. This will finish up our last science pub for this academic year, as I've mentioned. Huge thanks for everybody that's attending tonight and that will be viewing this post-event as well. Again, Flaxen couldn't have done this without you. Really, really appreciate it. Really thank you. Those of you that don't know, we had to do some shuffling around for our last science pub for the year, and Flaxen was gracious enough to present on what I think was an amazing topic. So I really appreciate that. Also, big thanks to Connect Central Oregon, who has yet again, been successfully utilizing their career training and intern program to help us put on these events. We cannot put these things on YouTube Live without their help. So we greatly appreciate that. So this concludes our Science Pub for Monday, May 9th, 2022. Tell a friend about your experience tonight. Share this presentation link, and we'll see you again next time, Beaver Nation, out there. Thanks again.